Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg. Today I'm going to continue in what I guess is an ongoing series of What Were They Thinking, uh, which is a series about pens, fountain pens, that have weird qualities to them. And you're wondering, why did they come up with that idea? Where did that come from? So this time, the pen that I'm going to focus on is the Epic. This is in Sapphire Blue from 2004. It's Pelikan. Just so you don't think that I am picking on Pelikan, because I before I did the level 5 and wondered about why they came up with that guy. I want you to remember that I love Pelikan pens and that the M800 is my all-time favorite pen. So don't think that Pelikan makes bad pens. They make great pens, but they also do some strange experiments. This is the Epic. Let me say that I think actually this is a nice looking pen. It writes very, very well. In terms of size, it's not a big pen. It's a bit fatter though, a little bit longer than the M200 by Pelikan. So you can see it's a little fatter. That means it's a little, the M400, excuse me, I think M400, here's the M400. So you can see that it has wider in girth, and so in that way it feels and handles a bit more like the M600, right? I think that's really what they were trying. That's kind of the sweet spot. You can see that it is smaller than the M800. You can also see how they are playing here on the clip with the beak-like form. It's not quite the classic clip that's on the whole Souverain line, but it still looks like a pelican beak, right? But it's a little more rounder. It's very nice, actually. I think that's nice. And you can also see how they are playing with the top. So you have a silver one chick pelican, just similar to the one that's on this M800. It doesn't screw on. It posts very well. And it closes with a snap, which of course is different from the traditional pen, which is a screw pen. And it's different because these lines of pens are piston fillers. Even the less expensive M200 is a piston filler, right? This uses cartridges. And I'll try to be careful with this because it actually has ink on it. So it opens the back, which is unusual for a cartridge pen, and then you see that it has this holder. I'm already getting ink on my hands, which actually is not such a good thing. It should be that when you open it up, you should be able to play with it and not get ink on your hands. I mean, that's true of the very inexpensive Schaefer student pens. Anyway, you see that it screws in here. You put the cartridge in, it screws this way, and that's how it works. But because you're doing it all from the back, you can't access the cartridge to squeeze it to start the pen off. And obviously it's very hard to fit a converter in this pen, if not impossible to put a converter into the pen. And I think it was another example of Pelikan trying to find a compromise between the traditional type of pen that they're known for, like the M800 or the M200 or the M1000. These are piston fill pens that haven't really changed very much in the way they look since the 1950s, and really go back all the way back to the 30s, and to try to find, like Lamy, a modern, up-to-date version of what a fountain pen should look like. I've discussed in great detail the most bizarre example that they came up with, which was the Level 5 pen, which has a bizarre filling system and looks bizarre, and I think was not much of a success. When it was time for the Epoch to come out in 2004, the advertising copy is a bit exaggerated, I would say, given, actually, I think it has a description for any fountain pen. It says, the symbiosis of tradition and modernity, see it, feel it, touch it, design that transcends its era, technology ahead of its time, suddenly breaking new ground feels like coming home, helping to capture momentous ideas and let go of the mundane, for writing a new chapter in history, your very own. This idea of technology ahead of its time, it seems as if they were talking about some kind of extraordinary computer engineer feat.
One resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
And I think they purposely wanted it to both look new and old, but instead of trying to make it look like the Souverain line, or the M200, they really went back to pre-World War II models, so that it does sort of evoke those earlier pens, but it has this very glistening, streamlined quality, which is supposed to make it look new, and I think that part of it is very successful. In terms of materials, there's something which I think is interesting. So I've read reviews online that say that the original P360, when it first came out, was all plastic, and therefore plastic that is meant to look like metal. But there is no doubt that this model, the barrel, is all metal. The cap is plastic, and if you go onto the archive for Pelikan, where they're describing the pen, they say that it is anodized aluminum. Now, I know the later models, the more expensive models, the P363, for example, those are all aluminum. So I think as they brought this out later, again, they made it also an aluminum. That's the only explanation, or it is possible, I suppose, that some of the people who were reviewing the original P360 were misled to thinking that it was all plastic. The other thing to say is that the nib unscrews like many other Pelikan pens, but it only takes a nib made for the Epic line, not the nibs that you are interchangeable with the M200 or the M400 or the M600, which in a way is a shame because those are very nice nibs, but this nib is, as I said before, looks more like a kind of Lamy nib or some of the Pelicano pens. So I think they thought that this was a more modern, more streamlined nib, and it writes quite nicely, but not without any flex at all, while the nibs on the M200 and the M400, particularly the gold ones, do have a kind of nice bounce to them. I haven't been able to try one of the more expensive Epic gold nibs, but from what I understand, those two don't have much flex. Here's what supposedly makes the pen so technologically advanced. You open it from behind, from the back, and it has this little holder that holds a cartridge into it. You fit the cartridge on here, and then you make sure that it's in there, and then you close the pen. And it is now ready to ink, but because of the way it's designed, you can't squeeze the cartridge, so that cartridge has already been opened and pen is working now, but it can take up to 5 minutes to actually get the ink to go through the pen. Now, why this is such a technological advance that they're claiming, I have no idea. The Sapphire company had been making cartridge pens since the 1950s, and here's the no-nonsense pen that they were making. They were still making this as a calligraphy pen, but it was very popular in the 70s and 80s. And look at it, it has a cartridge in it. Wow. And guess what? If you want, you can they even did start to sell a converter that would fit into this pen. So I don't see how Pelikan can claim that this is some kind of technological advance. In fact, it seems, if anything, a throwback to earlier kind of pen. Well, it doesn't even seem like a throwback. It just seems like a bad idea. So here you can see the converter that Sapphire starts to sell that would in fact fit in a no-nonsense pen, and so there are other cartridge pens. So, and this has been being sold since the 1970s. So I don't see where the technological advance comes in the case of the Epoch pen, which, don't get me wrong, is a very nice pen in terms of the way it looks. The material is nice. It has a nice look to it when it's posted. It posts very, very well. But in terms of the way the cartridge works, I think this is a mistake. Again, comes under the heading of what were they thinking? So it doesn't quite make sense to me why you need to even have this way of doing it. What is the advantage of putting the cartridge in this way? I suppose it holds it in more securely and it doesn't shake around. That's an advantage. But otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The other thing I would say is that it's supposed to use international cartridges, or people say that it can, but it's kind of finicky. And I've found that really, at least in my little store of different cartridges, that it really works best, or really only works with Pelikan cartridges, which is not totally unfair. Lamy, after all, uses a proprietary cartridge. So, that's not terribly unusual. And it's a very nice looking pen. It combines, as they say in the copy, a metal construction with a plastic cap. I have not experienced with this particular model, but I have seen online and even on sale on eBay that the pens can be fragile and flake. The coating can flake off. So the good news with the pen is that it writes well. It's very nice to hold. It doesn't use a converter, or I guess you could try somehow to get it to work with a converter, but you would have to fill the converter outside of the pen with a hypodermic needle, I suppose. And then the other problem is if you put a cartridge into it, you have to close it up. So you can't really put the cartridge in the way you can with a lot of other pens and sort of squeeze the cartridge to kind of get the ink flowing. You have to wait for the ink to kind of make its way through. The kind of thing that I tend to do is to dip the pen in a similar color ink, but that's a little odd to have to do that. So I don't see how this is an extraordinary technological advance. It After coming out with the initial pen with a metal nib, they introduced other models. I don't own that. I just have the Sapphire blue model that I was able to get on eBay very affordably because the person who was selling it didn't even know that it was an Epic. They thought it was a peculiar M200, I guess, but it was quite inexpensive. I got it for around $50, but they tend to go because they don't make this pen anymore. They only made it from 2004 to 2007. They tend to go for around 100 or more on eBay. So it came out in 2004. For the next few years, they made it, and actually they introduced more expensive models. And I don't know if that's because it was so successful, or they felt that in order to justify the cost of the pen, they had to make the pen more glamorous. So towards the end, they made a model that had a kind of wood grain outside. That's what it looks like in the pictures. And they made a model with an 18K nib. They claim in their advertising that the metal nib had a kind of palladium coating to it, which I guess would make it more expensive. And you will see in my writing sample that it writes really nicely. I think, not with any flex to it, but quite smoothly, more like a Lamy Safari, I would say, than like one of the Pelikan M-line pens, one of the Souverain pens. Well, the Souverain pens, of course, have 14K nibs, but if you're looking at the M200, I think that the Pelikan M200 pens write more smoothly and nicely than the Epic does. But that's just the way I feel. And I have not tried one of the gold nib versions. So this again is one of those pens that I wonder, what were they thinking? Did they just want people to use their cartridges? So that's part of the story. Why did they come up with it in this way? And it doesn't seem surprising to me that it wasn't really all that successful, or at least they didn't make it for very, very long. It is true that after the demise of the Epic, Pelikan started to make the Ductus, which looks very similar in terms of shape and also uses a cartridge and probably was made using a lot of the same machinery. It was quite an expensive pen, the 14K nib, particularly I think for a cartridge pen. Typically cartridge pens only are not expensive. So that I think is one of the downsizes of this pen. As always, I do a writing sample, and then I did quite an elaborate drawing in watercolor with the pen of these very peculiar but beautiful pincushion flowers that I got at Trader Joe's. So, as always, please subscribe. Subscribing is the way that you support the channel. We already have over 600 subscribers and aiming for 1,000. That would be a great Christmas present, but let's see if we can get to 700. Thank you. This is the Epic. So, of course, Pelikan, and it is medium. And this is Pelikan cartridge. It's blue. And this is Rhodia paper. And it is nice wetness. Not much flex, but it's a nice smooth writing experience. Just a bit of feedback. A little bit like a pencil. It actually is not that different to me from a kind of Lamy Safari. So it's a nice writing experience.